afternoon, good evening, wonderful, dear, beautiful family. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Does that look okay, you guys? To the mental house with me, your host, Khadijah. I'm so glad to be back with y'all. I'm gonna keep it going while I got a little energy, and hopefully, y'all are doing okay today. And get a chance to listen to the videos. So I'm gonna start right here. I always talk about how we are being programmed and how we've been programmed. And it's really a travesty that most people don't know, or if they do know, they don't know how to unprogram themselves. So I was reading this book, and I want to show it to you again. And it is a very good book. It's almost like we got this book club going on here. This book is called The Color of Law. I know it's going to be backwards, but The Color of Law. And it's a wonderful book by Richard Rothstein. Okay? And it's a forgotten history of how our government, not people, not individuals, it is a forgotten history of how our government is what and who segregated America. And it's really important that sometimes y'all get a kind of like the ability to put stuff in context of how we got here before we circle and go down this drain here. It's important that you have at least as much information as you possibly can have to know how we got here. And with that being said, individually, how you got to find some peace within through the madness, through the murk. You have to rise above that. You have to be able to look at it from a bird's eye view, and which is difficult for a lot of us who wear, skin we in. But that's also part of the process, and we have to put ourselves in a situation where, in my opinion, that we're doing. That's why it's important for us to do my eye, in my opinion, because we just a tiny grain of sand under the Creator, and you can just think of each grain of sand as a country or a village, and when you put that in terms of the universe, and you weigh it on the scale of the universe, it's a very small, insignificant thing. I hate to say it. No matter how big your problems are, no matter how you feel right now, if you put it on the scale of the universe, it's not. It doesn't weigh that much. It's like light as a feather. So if you do the individual work, then you'll be able to also be a little lighter and not so heavy in your chest and not so heavy in your thinking and so defeated. And especially if you have knowledge to know you didn't create some of these problems that you have. Majority of the problems, like 80% of them, were created by something way outside of, your control. Okay? For instance, let me share this with you. Although most officials intended public housing for middle and working class white families, its efforts result. Whenever you hear me mention the word, the letters PWAs, that stands for Public Works Administration. Okay, so it's just a short way of saying it. Anyway, Ike's effort resulted in African Americans occupying 1/3 of the units, an unprecedented government commitment to housing needs of African Americans. But Ike did not propose to integrate public works developments. Of the PWA's 47 projects, 17 were assigned to African Americans. Six others were segregated by building. The rest were for whites only. Ickles established a neighborhood composition rule. Federal housing projects should reflect the various racial composition of their neighborhoods. The projects in white areas could house only white tenants. Those in African American areas could only house African American tenants. And only projects in already integrated neighborhoods could use both white and blacks. In Birmingham, Alabama, the PWAs built a project restricted to African Americans in a neighborhood that the city zoned for black residents only. The federal government took a similar approach in Miami, where it agreed to segregate housing for African Americans in areas that the city's planners had designed exclusively for black residents. Miami civic leader explained to federal administration that the sites were chosen to remove the entire colored population from places that had been reserved for white occupancy. Despite its nominal rule of respecting the prior racial composition of the neighborhoods, itself a violation of African Americans' constitutional rights, by the way, the PWA segregated projects even where there had been no previous patterns of segregation. Let me listen to this. Despite this nominal rule, the respecting the prior racial composition of a neighborhood, that itself is a violation of African Americans' constitutional rights. That in itself. But the PDA segregated projects even where there was no previous pattern of segregation. At the time, many urban neighborhoods contained both black and white, mostly immigrant, low-income families. The neighborhoods were integrated because workers of both races needed to live close to downtown factory jobs to which they walked. The Public Works Administration designed many integrated neighborhoods as either white or black, and then used public housing to make designation come true. By installing whites-only projects in mixed neighborhoods, it deemed white and black-only projects those it deemed colored. The first PWA project, the Techwood Homes in Atlanta, opened in 1935. It was built on land cleared by demolishing the flats, a low-income integrated neighborhood adjacent to downtown that had included 1,600 families, nearly one-third of whom were African American. The Public Works remade the neighborhood with 604 units for white families only. The Techwood project not only created a segregated white community, it also intensified the segregation of African American families who, evicted from their homes, could find new housing only by crowding into some other neighborhoods where African Americans were already living. Some families evicted from the flats settled in segregated development, also created by the federal government, that later opened on the west side. But because public housing was intended not for poor but for lower middle class families, many of those displaced from the flats had incomes that were insufficient to qualify. Instead, many had to double up with relatives or rent units created when other African American families subdivided in their houses. A result of the government program, therefore, was increased population density that turned the African American neighborhoods into what you see today as slums. This is a perfect example of the marionette doing what it does best. The Satan doing what it does best. Because God is not the author of confusion. Satan is. And anytime you can see a forgotten history of how the government segregated America, you need to, and that does not negate the fact that you got wahoos out there and insane in the membrane, knuckleheads, and that they've been fed a diet now of madness. So it explains Don't make it better, but it also explains their mental illness as well. Okay? All of this done again by the marionette. Got us all fucked up in the Matrix. Excuse my language, but that's the only way I can describe it. All right, y'all. I'm gonna go. I gotta go. I just had to get that off my chest. Like what you hear again. If you like to read, pick up this book. It is a very, very. I'm giving it a shameless plug, but it is a good read. It really is. It is called "The Color of Law: A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America." And this book is by Richard Rothstein. All right. All right, if you like what you hear, please do what you always do. Like, subscribe, share. And I'm going to see you next time right here in the Mental House. Bye-bye.